Buckeyes still enrolled.
And welcome on into the live edition of Still Enrolled, a Big Ten football podcast. As always, Brian Tripp, Ryan Hickey with you here. Minutes after Ohio State does it, they win the national title. They take down Notre Dame 34-23. Tripp, we have a lot to break down, a lot to get into here. We are getting just minutes from Ohio State win this national title, what it means. We'll talk about obviously the game itself. Tripp, your initial thoughts as we watch the Buckeyes, and also, by the way, watch in the first year of the Still Enrolled podcast, watch a Big Ten team win the national championship.
Number one, I want to say how cool it is that you're there to experience the national championship in a 12-team playoff for the first time. That's interesting. I want to get your thoughts on this, and I'll give you my reaction to Ohio State winning. But because of how long the playoffs were, right? The first playoff game took place on the 20th of December, and that was Notre Dame hosting Indiana. To have this game a full month later on a Monday night in the midst of the NFL playoffs, 10 days after the semifinal round, right? There's all this talk, noise. I don't know that there was that hype and excitement leading up to a game between two powers, which ends up after it looks like Ohio State, Notre Dame has a great first drive, and then Ohio State just takes over offensively, getting points right on their first 5 drives of the football game, 3 on that short field, and then obviously getting the big play at the end to seal it on the offensive side. It didn't feel like it was going to be a close game, but credit Notre Dame. Going into the college football playoff semifinal round, their biggest deficit of the year was 7 points. Then they went into a 10-point deficit against Penn State, and then another 7-point deficit against Penn State. And in this game, when Mitch Jeter clanks that field goal, the short field goal, it's like, oh man, cool. It was fun while it lasted. Marcus Freeman probably should have gone for it there. How many possessions are you going to get left? But then the opportunities still presented themselves again to Notre Dame because of their passing game that's not talked about all year long. And right, because they've played with the lead. They haven't had to battle back. It's a gritty, gutsy effort, but ultimately the best team in college football on paper. There aren't hypotheticals, and we've learned it this year. There aren't hypotheticals in college football, but probably the best team assembled in college football is the one that's left standing at the end of the day. Now, how they got there, how this feels, I think we'll talk about over the next 25, 30 minutes. It's a little bit different than in the past. And they benefit from playing in a 12-team playoff as much as any team in college football this year because they would not have been in a 4-team playoff. So they benefit from it. But Ohio State ultimately wins a clash of 2 blue blood programs. And I think the team left standing at the end of the day, even though they weren't perfect, they weren't undefeated, is the best team in college football. But it was interesting leading up to it, wasn't it? It feels a little bit different to be sitting here on Monday, January 20th at 11:42 p.m. going live here to YouTube. It feels a little bit different this year than it has in the past. I think that's all these new dynamics that we've discussed over the last 17, 18, 19 weeks since we started doing this podcast.
You're right, because this is so new. And by the way, I guess for Ohio State, anytime there's a new format, they just win, right? 14 playoff, they win. 12 team. If there's a 14 or 16 team playoff, let me tell you, I'm putting a lot of money down on Ohio State whenever that's announced to win the first of the new format in national championships. But, let's actually start there, Chip. Let's start backwards, right? Let's start the end and then work our way towards the actual game. Because you're right, there's a lot of factors, right, the schedule and everything else. But it is weird because this Ohio State team just 6 weeks ago felt like it was a massive failure. We're sitting here after the last regular season weekend talking about a loss to Michigan. This team felt lost. Ryan Day felt lost. I mean, they basically was unanimous. He was going to get fired. It felt like every Ohio State fan and their mother wanted them out of there. This program, it felt broken.
Mm-hmm.
And now to be sitting here basically 6 weeks later talking about them being the best team in college football, it's so weird, Chip, because what you just said before, I couldn't agree more. They left as soon as that Michigan game ended. This last month, they have left no doubt. They have been the best team by far. Texas pushed them a little bit. Notre Dame game was scared here, but it's for the most part, they've kept most teams at arm's length. They've been the best team in college football for a month by a wide margin. When you take this entire year, now that we're here at the end, how do you look back on this Ohio State season where For 80% of the year, I feel like they played down to their competition, not up to their potential, every way you want to look at it. Michigan loss is obviously one that will not be forgotten for a while. But here they are at the end, which is really what you would say the most important. They're the Kings. They're number one.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because in the beginning of the year, really until they played Iowa, they hadn't played anybody. Then they really took it to Iowa, but then go on the road and lose at Autzen in Eugene in a 1-point game that could have gone either way. And you leave that game thinking, you know what? Oregon, home, best team in the country, Ohio State, like splitting hairs. That didn't change the narrative of Ohio State's season.
Right.
And in a normal college football season, or the ones that we've grown ourselves accustomed to over the last 10, 15, 20, for my life, 36 years, for some people, longer than that. Typically, Ohio State then would run the table and they would be there at the end. And it would be Ohio State and Oregon there at the end. Well, coming out of that game, don't play well against Nebraska and get a scare at home against Nebraska. Overcome a 10-point deficit in Happy Valley. And you're looking at Ohio State and going, where is Jeremiah Smith? Where is Igbuka? Where's the run game? Yeah, it was. And I've been the one to beat the drum of that Ohio State defense all year long. But this is still a flashy, talented, a team loaded with skill position players. They still got the job done because of a goal line stand in their running game at Penn State, coming from 10-0 down to win that football game. But you could just tell it wasn't all clicking. And then the Michigan game against their rival should have won. Had so many chances to win the game, didn't win the game. And then, as you said, the wheels fell off. But and it's not just being dominant in the playoff. It's to do it against a really good Tennessee team. And then to go and your rematch with Oregon, and I know Oregon had the long layoff, but to just blow them out. The game over, end of the first half. Then Texas, as you said, I think you said it great, keeping them at an arm's length the entire time. Even though it's tight, they're still never felt like Ohio State was in jeopardy of losing the game. And then the same thing tonight. I thought Ohio State, sure, Notre Dame made a game of it in the second half, but it was a different game. The game had a different complexion at that time. Ohio State had the opportunity Ohio State, when they had their chance to put them away in the second quarter and early in the third, they did. They did. It would have been a miraculous, heroic,
They're on 24 in the third quarter. It was over.
It was over. It was over. And they put them away. And they did. They did what a championship team does. And I'm just so impressed with their leadership, with Ryan Day. That's a lot of noise. And these are 18 to 22-year-old college football student athletes. You want to use that term? Players paid, whatever. They're on contracts. It's this $20 million roster. And for all the adversity, not just the Michigan game, but not being anywhere near perfect, I think, for the 12, 13 months of the regular season, and then to put this together at the end speaks so much volume about Day, the staff, for Chip Kelly to I think call some of the games that they did offensively in the playoffs, to do it with the offensive line injuries, for that defense to be that good all year, to get their best when it mattered most in those 4 playoff games. Wow. Just wow.
And obviously, right, Ohio State's had a ton of history, a ton of great teams, got a ton of great players, come through that program. So it's when you talk if you want to look all-time history, where does this team rank? It's probably not going to be just kind of what we outlined, right? They struggled at times, had some weaknesses, fighting through things. How impressive were they in some wins against Nebraska, let's say, where you're sitting there going, boy, how good is this team despite all the talent they have? Obviously, the Michigan loss. But I'll say this trip, the last 4 games we just watched them.
Yeah. At
least in my 30 years on this, I don't remember many Ohio State teams look more dominant and complete than this Ohio State team we saw the last 4 games. And 4 games I get will not make up for a whole year. I mean, you just said the biggest weakness before the season and really most of the season, right, was their offensive line. In this game, they ran for 214 yards. I get it, a banged up Notre Dame front, but still a physical Notre Dame defense. It's just how well they're able to turn to one. It's just everything clicked. They had the talent. They figured it out. And this 4-game stretch, I think is one of the best stretches we've ever seen Ohio State play football.
It's funny because what were the two biggest question marks about Ohio State coming into the year? Their offensive line and their quarterback position. How would Will Howard, would he fit? Would he turn it over? And he ended up being the most outstanding offensive player of this game. He goes 17 for 21, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns. It used his legs at the appropriate time. Hey, all that discussion in that first drive for Notre Dame, which ends up being 18 plays and 9 minutes and 45 seconds. They go down the field and they take a 7-0 lead, and they shortened the game. I mean, Ohio State didn't end its first scoring drive, its first drive of the game, first possession, until the second quarter.
Yeah.
Like Notre
Crazy.
Dame could not have drawn up a better first 17 minutes of football. Even though Ohio State scored, they also made Ohio State take the ball down the field and shorten the game. They eliminated, until the last offensive play for Ohio State, they eliminated the chunk plays for the Buckeyes.
Yep.
Like Notre Dame started the game and then settled back in defensively and played a game that they were hoping to, but Ohio State proved in the playoffs they can win anyway. And throughout the course of the year, I think this is where, you're pointing like the flaws out. This is where the 12-team playoff is unique, and how we feel at the end of a college football season. And like, we'll get to the layoff and the length of the season. Does this need to be moved up? Should the championship be on New Year's Day at the Rose Bowl every year? Like, we can talk about all those elements, and we'll have all off season to talk about it on the podcast once we digest it. I don't want to take away from what Ohio State, a Big Ten team, there's a Big Ten football podcast.
That's right.
What a Big Ten team accomplished here. But how we judge and view a national champion in a 12-team era is different than how we've judged a national champion, even in a 4-team playoff is still a pretty exclusive club. We learned it's real exclusive, but how you judge a champion now is a little bit different. You don't have to have a perfect season. It's more to the NFL model. You can have an injury or two during the year. You might have a hiccup. You might not be playing your best. Like, how many times over the last 8 years, 5 years, has it been discussed? Well, the Chiefs don't look dominant right now. Well, who's usually the team left standing at the end of the day? That's kind of the college football thing now. You don't have to win every game. You don't have to be perfect all year. But if you make the playoff and your roster is as darn good as Ohio State's is, and you're left standing at the end of the day, you're still the national champion. But I think how we look at a college football national champion has changed. And it probably should, because there's going to be, as we've discussed, schedules that aren't balanced. There's a longer season. You have mega conferences. So qualifying's qualifying. And they qualified, and they were the best team in the playoff, and that's ultimately when it matters. But you have to still have a really, really good regular season to get there. But typically, losing to your rival, which is just slightly above 500 team this year at home, usually that disqualifies you from winning a national championship. In a 12-team playoff, it doesn't. It doesn't take away from what they accomplished. I think it just forces us to view it through a different lens.
Because also, too, I think what it proves is Ohio State's not fraudulent. Like, not that anyone was saying that before, but like you lose to a 6-5 Michigan team, you're 10-2, they're out of a 14 playoff, and now all of a sudden you look back at what they were able to accomplish. Like, this season, they've beaten 6 top 7 teams in the country. Yeah. They've earned it. Like, if they were frauds, they're not even anywhere near the national title game. And again, maybe you have one bad game. We've seen it. Okay, it happens. Maybe for whatever reason, it takes a little bit longer to gel. In this case, they push it to the limit here. Is this going to be the norm every year? No, but for them, it was a weird year.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of parity in college football this year for the most part. But what you say, I don't know that anyone ever thought they were, like, I never thought they were fraudulent. But I think part of the reason, or a huge reason why Ryan Day was getting as much criticism as he was, and their staff, was you have this roster. Everyone knew how good the roster could be. And you don't win games on paper. In a portal era, how do you build your culture, which is such a thrown around word? But Kirk Herbstreit talked about that a little bit during the broadcast tonight, and how Will Howard was the right fit for them. But I don't think I've ever viewed it as fraudulent. I think the reason they got a lot of criticism is because they weren't living up to everyone knew how good they could be. Right. But you started this whole thing talking about they kind of underachieved. Like, this is supposed to be dominant, generational.
Like team. LSU 2019 type.
And they weren't. Like, they were the last 4 weeks, but they weren't. So,
but that's
I
what
think that also plays into your
credit.
perception of this team. Like, it plays into how you perceive them as national champs. Yeah, they're the best team at the end of the year, but they had adversity. They had flaws. They had problems throughout. There was almost an opportunity they weren't even here after everyone thought, oh, they're just going to run the table this year.
I like what Ryan Day said now a few times after these, wins in the playoff, where, referencing the Michigan loss, like, nothing worth, butchering it, but saying nothing worth, achieving is coming easy or something like that. And like, you learn a lot about yourself in the lowest moments. Like, I think that Michigan loss, obviously it galvanized them and turned them around. I think Ryan Day deserves a lot of credit for that, because I think a lot of most head coaches are not rebounding from that. Most teams, most leaders in college football are not rebounding from a loss that was so gut-wrenching and shocking that 95% of college football teams that are in Ohio State's position just fold up, lose to Tennessee at home, and call it a season. Just go right on out and end the season. So I think Ryan Day, first and foremost, deserves a lot of credit there for hitting rock bottom, looking himself in the mirror, the team looking themselves in the mirror. There's plenty of stories that came out between the Cotton Bowl and now about how that meeting, detailing it, a lot of honesty, a lot of just saying what had to be said. Why it didn't, happen early in the season, I don't know, but better to happen than not. And like, it's crazy to say, but like, if they beat Michigan, Trip, it does. I kind of feel like they're not here. Well, like, for how crazy that is, and obviously no Ohio State fan's going to say, I want to lose to Michigan. But it almost feels like for this season, and maybe this could be a lesson that trains us, right? Sometimes it's dangerous to play that game of, oh, this will just roll over to next year. It's a new group. Maybe for the coaching staff, for Ryan Day especially, it sticks and rolls over. This could be one of those moments that transcends the program for like 5 years down the road, not just the season. And it's like, it could be one of the biggest blessings in disguise.
No, I think you're completely right, because they get through that game, it masks all the issues that they're having.
Right, they win 16-13. They won.
Yeah, winning masks you don't have to hit the reset button. Everyone's happy. You're going to the playoffs, and it's okay. What do we accomplish in the playoffs? You're also a higher seed. You have a different path. Like, it changes
a lot.
Maybe
you're in the Big Ten title game.
You play SMU and Boise and don't really get challenged in the first 2 games, and all of a sudden you're pushed against whoever in a semifinal. Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas in a semifinal, and you're not equipped like that.
Maybe you play Oregon if they already have a game under their belt instead of a long break. Like,
that equipped them with the tools they needed to win the national championship. I think you're spot on with that. But to kind of like wrap up this discussion, like, we'll get into the game here, give you X's and O's and what we thought really tipped it in Ohio State's favor. But to kind of put a bow on the discussion, it leads me back to where you started this. I know you just threw up on the screen roller coaster ride, how you view it for Ohio State. Because of that, does it make it less impressive, more impressive? Does it cheapen it? Like, what ultimately is the legacy? Losing to Michigan, there's still going to be some people that don't give this team its full due and full credit because they lost to Michigan. How does that impact how you view Ryan Day, this Ohio State team? Because there still is, they just won the national championship.
Yep.
But still hanging over their head. Maybe a 12-team playoff is different, but I didn't think we could be sitting here having an Ohio State national championship discussion while still having them lost to Michigan. It's kind of that same thing. We were 65 minutes of football away from talking about like a Penn State in this spot. That'd be like sitting here and saying Penn State, but they still haven't beaten Ohio State or Michigan. For Ohio State, they still haven't beaten Michigan. Michigan finally cleared that hurdle and then won the title. So we didn't have that discussion when we were talking about Michigan, back-to-back Big Ten champions. So what is your feeling on Ohio State? Even though there is still there's a voice, there's that little cloud, like, still hanging over them.
I go back to what I said before. For me, it's like more impressive just because that loss was like, it like wherever you were, almost felt like an earthquake. It just like rocked the college football world. Of Ohio State lost at home to Michigan is 21 point. Like, it was just one of those where it felt like such an easy win. And okay, Ryan Day is due. He's going to get over the hump. Michigan is down. Ohio State's up. This is their, like, It wasn't even a thought. I remember in our picks, we're joking about, like, could they even keep their point spread close? And we're both like, no. And so it's like, I think for me, because you reach that low moment, and then it's such an awkward thing because you don't have that much time off. In the 14 playoff, you have 3 weeks to a month off, depending on when you play, between the last game and your first playoff game. So you have time to, okay, let it soak in, maybe forget about it. We can move on. The playoff, you had 1 week off, and then it's kind of like right back into it. And so it's like, I think for me, it's still more impressive just because when you get that low, especially with college kids, 18 to 22-year-olds, which I think for me, why I love college football so much, part of it is just the raw emotion that I think you just see college kids play with and exude. That raw emotion can work in two ways, right? It can help benefit you and be a catalyst. It could also be a detractor. And I think once you see like how Ohio State played that Michigan game coming out, I remember we're sitting there going, what the hell are we going to see? We had Joey Kaufman on of Columbus Dispatch, and we're sitting there going, we have no idea what Ohio State team's going to show up. No idea. There's a Tennessee invasion. Like, that was the lowest that program has been in a long time, because at least when they lost to Michigan the last 3 years, Michigan was the best team in the country, and they won the national title. Again, you're not happy about it if you're Ohio State, but it's okay. We lost to the best. I guess I can understand it. This is a year where you lost to an average Michigan team that was supposed to be down and out. I think for me, I go to more impressive just because when you hit rock bottom like that and to rebound that quickly in such a pressurized environment, I will say, despite the loss, this is still to me more impressive. I don't think it cheapens it at all because, again, the road they still had to go through was tough. I mean, you could argue they had to face the 4 toughest teams possibly, potentially, at least 3 of the 4 toughest teams they could have faced. Right, in Tennessee, I think the first round was the toughest opponent. Oregon in the second round, definitely the toughest opponent. I would say Texas in the third round was the number 5 seed, toughest opponent. And then here, maybe Penn State, a little bit healthier, matches up better. Like, maybe that was the only other matchup we could talk about where, they got a better end of the draw in playing Notre Dame compared to Penn State. Either way, I think Ohio State's winning this game, honestly, either way. But that's like, they proved on the field. They played the 4 toughest opponents they could. They won. I don't think there's anything taken away from this title. Like, there's no asterisk or anything, or like, but the loss to Michigan, I would say more impressive. How about you, Trip?
No, I agree. But I completely agree with all of that. I think it's a different era of college football. It's the first time we got to, so it all feels fresh and new and different to us. But I think that's the only reason why. I think it makes it more impressive how they did it to still be here at the end. Certainly different way to get there. Usually aren't going to have that opportunity, but now if you get a second chance, can you make the most of it? And they did.
They absolutely did. And I think everything you hear about sports, right? Bouncing back from adversity, your character's shown in the toughest moments, like all those coach speak cliches, if you will. I thought they were rung true and just put on full screen here on this playoff run. So how'd they do it, Trip? Let's look at this game. They hold on 34. I mean, at one point it was 31-7. And I'm sitting here, okay, we can start the pod in the third quarter. And
I was going to say that. I was about to text you. I was literally
like, let's
just do this thing now. Wow.
Notre Dame comes back and 3rd and 11. And I feel like it's very fitting that you saw Will Howard to Jeremiah Smith ice the game here. Your takeaway, your initial reaction, at least on the field wise, to how Ohio State was able to hold on and beat Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I'm interested because you have that interesting view of actually being there, sitting there, feeling the fans, the atmosphere, the environment. You got that all 22 look from where you were sitting way up there. But
you want to see? I'm in the corner of the end zone
what's
here.
The view like? Great, really cool stadium, by the way. We're probably breaking some sort of ESPN protocol right now by showing you live footage of
Look at that.
of a now empty field.
So that right there, that 10-yard line right in front of me was the Jeremiah Smith catch, which is actually very cool to see. But yeah, it was a nice bird's eye view. Great. You're right. You guys were here for the Peach Bowl last year, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah, nice, very cool stadium. Modern, very loud. It is.
Yeah.
Like the 2 big fan bases. I thought this atmosphere today was amazing. I will say between the fans, the music, I don't know if it's how this building is, but it's just like it's built to echo. It was insanely loud all game long. It was a great atmosphere.
No, and I felt that too at the Fiesta Bowl and at the Orange Bowl, just how loud both fan bases of each team were. I think it's the stakes of the game. Everyone's invested in the game. If you're going to that type of experience and that type of game, you're going to be loud, even though you're only like 50-50, 60-40 in terms of fans that are cheering for any given play. As I said, I think I hinted at before we kind of went off and talked about big picture Ohio State. You could not have asked for a better start for Notre Dame. And for them to take it down the field, chew all the clock, get into third and shorts and convert. And it all started for them with their ability early to run the ball successfully on first down and get 3-4 yards. But then as that second quarter, third quarter started to wear on, how many times was Leonard, or they're so far behind they can't run the ball, but Leonard taking sacks, and they had to play from behind the sticks and play catch up. It was really a clinical masterpiece by Ohio State. It was a clinical masterpiece by Ohio State. They were able to stay on the field, didn't have a lot of third downs. They were able to stay on the field on their third downs early. They're perfect. Howard was perfect for his first 13 passes. They had 9 for 12 on third down, but they were able to stay on the field. And after that first Notre Dame drive, they were able to get off the field. They got them into third and longers, and they were able to get off the field. Like, to me, it sounds so simple, but Ohio State was able to run the ball. Notre Dame wasn't. Henderson was electric, and they found, Chip Kelly found creative ways to get the ball into the hands. I loved when he lined, I think it was Judkins outside and had the two tight ends blocking for him in front of him. Just a quick throw, obviously the first touchdown where they bring Smith into the backfield, then back out, and you can see Gray's trying to signal to Notre Dame. And then he went and covered. They had triple coverage on the tight end, but no one stayed on the side of the field that Smith was on. I thought it was just clinical by Ohio State. Like, there's certain areas you can look at. Those third downs is certainly one of it. Their ability to run the ball, the way Kelly and Day called the game, made it really easy for Will Howard. That's not a takeaway from him. He was awesome. He used his legs at the most opportune times to extend drives. But Ohio State stayed on schedule for the most part. Mm-hmm. And even when they weren't on schedule, the person I was watching, I lean over and go, to stop this offense with these playmakers, the running backs, the wide receivers, the quarterback, and his ability to use his legs, how do you stop them for 3 consecutive plays? Like, even if they're in a 3rd and 8, you never sensed any panic. Like, okay, we got it. And they weren't in a lot of them, but it just was really completely clinical by Ohio State.
That's and it's maybe it hits different live compared to I don't know if you feel this watching a game in person versus watching TV. You just almost feel more helpless, if you will, as just a neutral observer. Like when you said, I don't know how this Notre Dame defense stops them. It's just there's so many weapons where it's Judkins, it's Henderson, obviously it's Jeremiah Smith, but you have Carnell Tate, you had Innis with a big third down reception on honestly a third. I think it's a 3rd and 7 that could have maybe gotten Notre Dame some more momentum in the second half that maybe allows them to, It's just we're talking about 6 or 7 guys. That's how the hell do you stop? You take away 4 of them, there's still 2 or 3 of them that are still winning their matchups.
And then Howard running.
It's
designed
unfair.
Run plays and off-script run plays.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. I can look at certain stats. We can try to break things down, but it just felt like they had too much firepower on offense. Notre Dame was unable to take advantage the same way the other 3 teams in the playoff couldn't take advantage of a depleted Ohio State offensive line. And then look at the end. They decide when they're somehow able to climb back in this game, needing those 2-point conversions and everything, they, with their passing game and Greathouse making some huge plays, 2 touchdowns, 128 yards, and Leonard throwing the ball under duress with his back against the wall. But they decide to dial up cover 0 and all-out blitz, and Gray, they just put Gray on an island with Jeremiah Smith, which is, you're hoping that one of your 7 guys can get home, and they don't even sniff Will Howard on the play. It's that offensive line kept him upright again, and he just heaved it up. And Smith was open by about 5 yards, and that was all she wrote.
I'm glad you that. It feels like that one play truly encapsulates everything for Ohio State. Like you said, the offensive line is the biggest question this season. On the biggest play of the season that possibly could determine the national title game, Notre Dame blitzes, like you said, Will Howard sitting back there clean, like he was, by the way, all day.
And great block from Travion Henderson on the play.
Yes. The protection was outstanding. And again, it was outstanding in this game and really all playoff long too. Will Howard has not been sacked very often, not been pressured very often. Part of the reason why he's been so good in this playoff has been because he's had time to read the defenses, make his reads and not rush throws. The offensive line did their job. Will Howard throws a beautiful dime to Jeremiah Smith, and the best player on the field every time he's out there makes the play. It's like the perfect encapsulation to where even though Will Howard's job is easier with all the weapons he has, he's still got to make the throws, still got to make the right reads. 13 of 13 to start, like you said, made every right decision, put the ball only where his receivers could catch it. And then again, the final one, we've seen plenty of quarterbacks, and even today, Ryan Leonard missed a lot of open throws. It was a great throw. Smith was open. College kid, can you overthrow him? Can you underthrow him?
Let me add this. I'm just going to read this to you. Judkins, 11 carries. Howard, 16 carries. Henderson, 12 carries. Egbuka, 1 carry. Smith, 1 carry. Egbuka, 6 catches. Smith, 5 catches. Tate, 2 catches. Judkins, 2 catches. Innes, you said 1 catch. Scott, the tight end, 1 catch. But just the distribution, is like 33% carries are going to go to Judkins, 33 are going to go to Howard, and 33 are going to go to Henderson. Notre Dame, Leonard ran 17 times. I know they were trailing, so it changes the game plan. Love had 4 carries for 3 yards.
He was invisible. I think 2 of those were on the first drive.
Price had 3 carries for 13 yards. Like that distribution, what Ohio State did to balance their offense and get Judkins with his 2 catches, 13 touches. Henderson, a dozen touches. Howard threw 21 passes, ran 60. The way they distributed it, getting Egbuka and Smith touches in the run game, even though the one Smith was ugly, like finding ways to get them the ball in different spots and getting a running back lined up outside, bringing a receiver into that orbit motion into the backfield, and then to bring him back out the outside to dump it off for a touchdown. What they did in different ways to get their guys the ball and distribute. I'm not saying to keep everyone happy, but when you think about when you have all those playmakers, the stress it puts on a defense, and really to beat them north-south. And I thought there was a few times Notre Dame kind of went horizontally, and they paid the price for it. Ohio State went horizontally a couple times and paid the price for it. North-south against a fast defense and get guys the ball in different spots to utilize your skill. Like it was, again, I use the word, it was really clinical by Ohio State. It felt like a clinical first half. The game fell over at halftime. In theory, Notre Dame had an opportunity to come back, kind of made it interesting. But I don't think much changed. Like we can break down the second half and say this is what Notre Dame did, and Ohio State needed to play to hang on at the end. But ultimately, the game was over at halftime because Ohio State just had a complete stranglehold and was playing so well.
And to your point about the distribution, both in the run game and the pass game, it's hard enough, right, to cover Jeremiah Smith, even when you know he's getting the ball. But like with how well Chip Kelly was able to get all his playmakers touches in space, in different ways in the pass game and in the run game, it keeps your defense, no matter what defense you're playing, guessing. And it always felt like Notre Dame's defense was playing catch up. And I thought Chip Kelly, outside of really maybe a drive or two in the fourth quarter when Notre Dame started making a comeback and it felt like they're kind of more just, all right, let's just kind of run the clock out versus like, let's try to put our foot on the throat and knock them out. And that's what, even why, with that being said, is you kind of feel like, okay, well, Notre Dame cuts it from 24 to 16, 16 to 8, even with that questionable field goal decision by Marcus Freeman. Why, anytime I guess you can cut a two-score deficit into a 2-score deficit in the fourth quarter, I guess you got to take it.
I will say this. It's actually an interesting point. It's not a 2-score deficit. It's 4 because they need to get in the end zone 4 times. It's touchdowns against that red zone defense.
Yes.
Like I get the thought. So they were taking it to a 3-score game instead of a 4-score game.
But with like about 11 minutes or so left, right, with that defense
I know. I agree.
Playing as well as they are, like,
I don't think you're getting the ball back enough.
Right, and that's the biggest. I get what you're saying because and we saw that kind of late, like that Ohio State red zone defense is, again, they have the respect of everybody clearly. But just to think, right, in that case, you're going to get the ball back. But if
you start thinking about it as how many times you have to get into the end zone against that defense, I saw your tweet, saw a lot of tweets. Like, I get it because possession, you're trying to win the national championship. You don't want to go out and say, oh, what happens if I would have gone for it there? We would have gotten the ball back. We would have had an opportunity to do it, right? So I get it, but
can I throw a hot take?
See where Marcus Freeman's call. I don't think it's one of those calls that is 95-5. Like, I thought it was pretty like 50-50 toss-up. I said I think he might kick here when I'm watching the game.
I think Steve Sarkisian's decision last game on like 2nd and goal from the one to do the pitch play that lost like 7 yards. I think that's more understandable than kicking the field goal. They were on, I believe it was the 5, maybe the 4, if I'm not mistaken, for Notre Dame on that decision.
Yeah.
Seven. Okay, thank you. I still think,
which might be better. Then you have a little bit more field goal.
Honestly. But like to go back to this report, I was going to say about crediting Chip Kelly was, again, like we're sitting there at 3rd and 11, right? Just over 2 minutes to go, and it's like you kind of feel Ryan Day get a little tight. You feel Chip Kelly get a little tight. You see, okay, we're just going to run Will Howard. I give him a lot of credit for saying, you know what? We're going to go out and win this national title. And again, I think it kind of goes back to maybe that Michigan loss, rock bottom, self-evaluation helps to say, you know what? Usually maybe we'll play it a little conservative. I think he does skew conservative generally amongst coaches. I think you can kind of say, like, you know what? We're going to go win this. And we're going to give the ball to our best player in Will Howard. He's going to throw the ball to our best offensive threat in Jeremiah Smith. We're going to win the game. I give Chip Kelly a lot of credit as well for that play call to say, you know what? We're not just going to have Notre Dame burn the last time out and just trust our defense. We're going to win this game right now.
I don't really have much more to add. I don't know if you have more on Ohio State. Like, we didn't mention any of their defensive players. Downs was all over the field. Sawyer, Simon. But it kind of was.
It was a weird defense defensively.
Well, they weren't on the field much.
Right. And they dominated for
they just weren't on the field.
And like you said, Caleb Downs was a beast. JTT had 2 tackles for loss.
How many plays did Notre Dame run? Notre Dame only ran 32 passes, 26 carries. So they only ran 50. I'm sure there's some they only ran 58 plays.
And I got to look at the breakdown. I mean, 18 of them, 19 came in on that first drive. And I would probably say maybe around equal in that 4th quarter because they did get 2 stops with a fumble and they forced Ohio State to punt. So like probably 70% of those plays came on the first drive in the 4th quarter.
Well, they only ran 11 plays after that first drive. They only ran 11 plays until their touchdown drive.
Oh, and that was in the late
3rd quarter. Late 3rd quarter. They only ran 11 plays. So that's probably why it feels that way.
Like they were so good, but it's just almost like Caleb Downs and Cody Simon, I guess, are the 2 guys you could absolutely highlight. But it's like that defensive line I thought would play. I thought they'd be more disruptive, and also credit to Riley Leonard just because of his mobility. I think also makes it tougher to take him down. But it did feel like a little bit of a weird defensive game where you felt like, I mean, I tweeted it. I think it was like 21-7 and still in the first half. Like, this game's over because Notre Dame's offense is shot. Like, they have no chance to move the ball. And I guess that's part of it.
I think that's the thing. They didn't have the ball.
Which is also incredible.
First drive, Ohio State responds. Long drive of their own. 3 and out, Ohio State. 3 and out, Ohio State. And a half. That's it.
And
Ohio State got the ball to start the second half.
10-minute opening drive for Notre Dame, and they finished -5 in time of possession. So basically,
I mean, if you're Notre Dame, you didn't want to give up, and I know they gave up the long run, 70 yards, but they made Ohio State on their first 3 drives go 11 plays, 75 yards, 10 plays, 76 yards, 12 plays, 80 yards. But they scored touchdowns on all of them. You know, if you're Notre Dame, it's, can we stop them, hold them to a field goal attempt? What can we do? What can we do? And they didn't. They didn't play a bad game. They just didn't have the horsepower that Ohio State had.
We talked about, right, we struggled a lot with, or maybe not struggled, but just kind of really fleshed out a lot last week about, like, what does this game look like being played on Notre Dame's terms versus Ohio State's terms? It did feel like the game was played on Notre Dame's terms in the sense of, we talked about them going on long drives, eat up the clock, and then if you're going to allow Ohio State to score, right, which felt inevitable, but it's make them go down the field, again, eat up their own clock and just shorten this game in terms of time of possession. If, like, looking back, I felt like that's what Notre Dame did a good job of for the most part. But like you said, the drives that they just Ohio State went on, every third down, they felt like they converted. And every drive ended in a touchdown.
Ohio State only had 8 possessions in the game. They scored on 6 of the 8 possessions. And they obviously punted in the 4th quarter. And another one where they didn't score when they were going in and they fumbled. On a great catch and run by Egbuka, a great play to punch it out. So they Notre Dame average third down distance. Like, we can keep nitpicking, like, look to like what to talk about with the game. Notre Dame's average third down distance was 7 yards. They're not going to win with that.
No.
But it took them, once they started to throw the ball, like maybe they should have had a more balanced game plan early. It seemed like they were almost too conservative with that run attack. They thought every drive would be like the first drive. And then I think they got themselves in too big of a hole.
And credit to Ohio State
for battling back. Like that's a lot of heart and grit and Greathouse and Leonard. They actually proved that they can throw the ball. Yeah. And I know Ohio State at that point is up big, so it's a little bit different. But they were able to keep Sawyer and JTT. They got pressure, but kept them off Leonard for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was just clinical. I keep coming back to it. It was Ohio State, whatever they wanted to do, no matter what the situation they were in, they were able to do.
And to finish the pod kind of where we started, it feels like as we're sitting here now, minutes after the national championship being over, the best team this season won. Wasn't the case all year long. Mm-hmm. The most talented team won, and the team playing the best football at the end, which you made the comparison early in the pod, like, this kind of feels like the NFL playoffs now. That's kind of what the NFL playoffs are. You mentioned the Chiefs. Like the Chiefs, okay, could slide through September, October, December. But then all of a sudden, when it's time to lock in, they make sure they're playing their cleanest, best brand of football. And right now it's resulted in 2, possibly 3 Super Bowls. Ohio State did that exact blueprint. And now as we're sitting here, it does feel like we're talking about the best team in college football winning it all. And I think that's like people are divided on the format, on the bye. Like there's a lot of discussion, right, about the playoff itself. How many teams are too much? What should it be? Who should get byes? Who shouldn't, etc. Whatever the format, whatever the bye, I think the ultimate goal, right, is to have the best teams in it to win. And usually, the talent rises to the top. We're talking about the best team in college football rising to the top. Simple as that.
Yeah. It sums it up perfectly. Not the best team all year, but the most talented roster, which ends up playing as the most complete dominant team when it matters most.
So now we can finally close the book on season 1 of Still Enrolled in the 2024 college football season, as we are now 1-for-1 in terms of Big Ten teams winning national titles on the pod. And we're going to do – pod's not going away. There's no offseason here in college football, no offseason on Still Enrolled pod. That is for sure.
We have a lot to dive into to talk further about this game, Ohio State, the playoff, the length of the playoff. Like, was there a buzz at least in Atlanta leading
Big
up
time.
to it?
Huge.
Okay.
Huge. I got in yesterday, which now, depending on if you're listening to this on the podcast or watching it later on YouTube, Tuesday morning. I got it on Sunday. Yep. There was a lot of Ohio State fans, a lot of Notre Dame fans on Monday morning. It was it's funny because on social media, I'm seeing a lot of tweets. Oh, there's no buzz, no buzz, no buzz. I thought here it was the buzz off the charts.
Yeah, and it was interesting too because the resale market prices for tickets were outlandish, like Super Bowl level prices to get in. It started at over 2,500 to 35. I saw a number today, like 4,200 get in price on the secondary market for the game. So obviously people care. Big fan bases, 2 national programs. I think different. Notre Dame hadn't been there. Ohio State hadn't won since 2014. So it's not like you have this stale. I'm trying to, because the games are great, but it wasn't Georgia, Alabama again.
Right? Like, stuff we've seen.
It's different. But I'll
to highlight that, by the way, you know who's sitting? So like where the press box is, right? Like we're in the auxiliary section here. So like we are basically, they cut out seats for some of the overflow media members. So like to my right and my left, there's about 5 seats for media, and then it's like literally the fans.
Yeah,
sitting like as a fan, not a media member, like 7 seats away from me, just to highlight the expense in this. I'm not going to count his money, but you can do the math. Albert Breer, of all people, obviously famous Ohio State alum, sitting all the way up here in the upper deck. For this time, tickets were insane.
But I will say it did lose. It does feel, it's just longer. It's just different. It did feel like it lost. And maybe it's because of who I worked with and where I went and disappointment for me personally and my allegiance, where I live. Like I didn't feel I can't wait. National championships on Monday night. Who you got? You got Ohio State going against Notre Dame. It's just
what if this game is on a Friday night
or
versus
Thursday.
Monday
or Thursday?
I think Monday's the worst day you could possibly have. Like,
You know
I
what?
get it. Like we had 4 great NFL games. It's like an emotional hangover. I get it. If you wake up Monday morning, it goes, oh, another game. Like,
And you know what? We can digest this and talk about it all off season. I want to let you get out of there. Enjoy it. I'm going to let you get out of there safely, hopefully back to your hotel and safely home. I almost said enjoy Atlanta, but
well, this time there's very few places open. And
Waffle House,
which seen plenty of videos where I'm not going to try to go there. And there's other late night joints that I think I'll be skipping, we'll say, to say the least, here in Atlanta as well.
Safe flight tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning, although there's some 9 a.m., although I've already gotten alerts that there's some maybe weather now. Also, it's Atlanta. So in Atlanta, which I think is just cold weather. From what I've gathered, they don't do weather very well here. So as long as they can manage the cold, fingers crossed, I'll be home safe and sound and ready to get another pod in later this week, where not only more about this game, season in review. Like, I feel like we do everyone a Big Ten season in review. So the biggest surprises, some of the biggest disappointments, overall takeaways, and give out some grades as well here. Kind of look back now as the season's complete on the Big Ten overall season. So again, if you're not an Ohio State fan, I get it. Obviously, this pod is making it a little bit more difficult for you to listen to than if you are a Buckeye fan, which if you are listening, appreciate you, number one. Number two, congratulations. But we got everybody covered here in the Big Ten soon as well, and we'll be covering all 18 teams. Again, now as the playoff kind of goes back into focus, we start to look ahead at the general conference here for 2025 and beyond. So excited for a trip. We got a lot to get into here. Appreciate everyone listening on this live edition. Again, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you're subscribing, tell your friends, because we are going nowhere. The doldrums of winter is here, but neither of us are bringing you down. That is for sure. You don't like that? You set the gold standard for like transitions and like little lines. So I will say I tried to match what you do. I thought it was not my best, but I don't think it was the worst.
But it's 12:25 a.m. on a Tuesday. I mean, you're probably hype sitting there in the stadium. I just laid on my couch for the last 3 hours. I'm sitting right next to my bed. So I'm just like, buddy, wrap it up. Wrap it up. Slippers are coming off and I'm jumping in.
Slippers. All right. Well, we'll get Old Man Trip to bed here. Thank you again for tuning on in. We'll talk to you soon right here, of course, on the Still Enrolled podcast.